What is going on, guys? Matt Downs with Daily Grind Fantasy Sports here to give you the edge for the Seahawks versus Washington football team matchup on DraftKings. Cannot wait to break it down. Last night, we got to see a great matchup between the Ravens and the Browns. I'm only joking. It was such a low-scoring game, and we saw 4 interceptions. Hopefully, we don't see another one of those types of games here with these two teams. But the good thing is it's supposed to be competitive, so that's something. But man, Russell Wilson has been struggling as of late. Hopefully, he picks it back up because I do love primetime Russell Wilson. I'm going to bring you that and the rest of this analysis right now. Now, before we jump right into the slate, I want to give a quick shout-out to our biggest partner, PrizePicks. If you guys haven't signed up for PrizePicks, first of all, what are you doing? Enter code using DGF for a 100% match up to $100. It's a fantasy DFS app where you simply hit the over or under on any certain fantasy point projection or single stat DFS prop. So you can look in front of you. We got things like rush yards, receiving yards, receptions for NFL. We got fantasy score props. We also have college basketball, NBA if you're into that. We also have NHL. So a lot of other sports to cover, and really PrizePicks is ever expanding, and they're always bringing up new sports onto the board. And again, if you enter code using DGF, you get a 100% match up to $100. You can just play with for the free $100 that you get into your account and never play again if you lose it all. But now let's go ahead and focus on this showdown slate between the Seahawks and the Washington football team. The over-under is at a 47, pretty similar to what we saw last night. I believe the Ravens and the Browns were at the 46-47 game total. So we're expecting a similar type of game here. I do think it's going to be rather on the low-scoring side if I had to bet one side or the other, just because Russell Wilson, let's just talk about this right off the rip here. He's been struggling as of late, and it's because of his hindering injury. Trying to get back on track, and they know that they need him, hence the reason why he's still playing. I do think if these guys were like way out of playoff contention, they would just, put him back up on the rack for the rest of the season. But honestly, it looks to be like this injury is affecting him, at least, in the short term. So that's something that I am keeping an eye on. And honestly, like, if you just look at his fantasy point projections and just like what he's been doing, it's just nothing compared to what he did before he got injured. I know I'm kind of just throwing the curveball out just because, this is something that we have to address here. He's got an 8.5 points, 7.64, 10 back in week 5 when he got injured. And then before that, he got 22.5, 16.6, 26, and 27. And analysts are saying that his arm is affecting him, at least in the short term. So this is very, very noteworthy. One thing you have to consider. So that's exactly why I think this should be on the lower scoring rather than the higher scoring type of game script. I do hope he gets better because I love Russell Wilson, one of my favorite players in the NFL. But let's go ahead and talk about these defenses. Are they viable in this matchup? I will say they are, but again, you already know my stance. The ownership is actually pretty high on these guys, and I wanted to take a look at the ownership because I wanted to see if the public was agreeing with me here. Washington football team at 17%, and the Seahawks are projected at 16.2 here in terms of larger GBP. So you know me, for a quick fade and just a quick edge, I love fading these defense. The Browns defense did make it into the optimal last night because Lamar Jackson threw 4 interceptions. I don't think that's going to happen in this matchup. So hence the reason I'm fading these guys at higher ownership. It is very rare that defenses make it into the optimal. And last night was the one of few times that happened this season. So let's go ahead and focus on the skill position players right now. Let's focus on the Seahawks side. I also forgot to mention that the Seahawks are favored by 1 single point here to the Washington football team, and they are playing at home. So let's go ahead and talk about Russell Wilson. His fantasy projections at 18. That's pretty high, 18 points. And honestly, if I had to enter one side or the other here on PrizePicks, I'd probably take the under on Russell Wilson here at 18 fantasy points. But he's also showing very high owned at 48.3%. I think this is going to be a very balanced type game script, and I hope that he does well. At a 11K price tag, I definitely think that he has to be in your lineup here, especially at 48.3% ownership. Nothing more needs to be said. If the ownership really is that high on him, then yeah, I do think he needs to be in your builds. Now focusing on the running back situation, Travis Homer is ruled out here for this contest versus Washington football team. Alex Collins and DJ Dallas are the assumed 1 and 2 back here in this matchup. So let's actually focus on Alex Collins first. The last 3 games, he's had 10, 10, and 10 attempts. So we can assume he's going to get something similar. If we take a look here at the snap counts for this team, it has been the Alex Collins and DJ Dallas show. They're both splitting carries here at 37%. One thing to consider here is DJ Dallas is on the field for a primary passing back. Now, keep in mind, last game he did score a touchdown here in the red zone. They didn't really utilize him in the red zone. It was just kind of like a lucky, he happened to be on the field and they happened to rush it at that point in time. Did score the 1 touchdown. Also, again, is more involved in the receiving game than Alex Collins. As you can see, got 0 attempts last game and is the primary workhorse back. So taking all those things into consideration here, the price tags are a little bit on the lower side. However, they are only on the field for about 37% of the time. I don't really know what type of game script this is going to favor here because it is a 1-point spread. I would lean more towards Alex Collins, and I think the public does agree here with 31.4% of the ownership coming in on him. He's also projected to score 8.5 points, so I do favor him a little bit. He is a little bit more expensive at a 6.6K price tag, and DJ Dallas at 5.2. Just with the volatility and not knowing the game script here and what running back they're going to lean on the most, I don't consider each one of these running backs cash viable. I think these guys are just more for GPPs. Now, let's talk about the wide receiver picture here. DK Metcalf has been getting consistent targets. However, Russell Wilson hasn't been able to throw to him. He's only caught 50% of the passes in week 11 and even less here in week 10. But the volume is still going to be there at an 8.8K price tag. He's cheaper than Tyler Lockett, which means that I think he's going to be one of the higher owned guys here on the slate. Russell Wilson's primary target, 41.1% owned, 13.3 or 13.5 projection is even higher than Tyler Lockett. So I really don't get the price tag bump here on Tyler Lockett. That being said, Tyler Lockett should be more of a GPP option. Now, if you can get both of these guys into your cash lineup, then I definitely don't mind that because the projections are pretty much the exact same. But Tyler Lockett is a little bit more, thus making DK Metcalf the safer cash option there. Freddie Swain at $2,200 hasn't gotten a reception the past 2 weeks, so I'm not high on him. At $2,200, he has to get to 4.4 DK points to cover that price tag. We only have him projected for one single DraftKings point. Definitely more of a GPP option, in my opinion. Now let's move over to the tight end picture here with Gerald Everett and Will Dissly. Let's talk about Everett at $6,200. I think that is a little bit too expensive for me. He's been getting consistent targets. I won't deny that because I guess Russell Wilson isn't able to throw it as far downfield as he usually is. But 6.2K, you have to get to 12.4 DK points. And even in his boom game he got in week 10, he still barely hit that mark. So I don't think he's cash viable. I definitely think he's more of a GPP option. But I do like Will Dissly here at $600. Let's actually take a look at the snap counts. Will Dissly's actually on the field a surprising amount of time, on the field nearly half of the time. So at 51%, I definitely do like the value that comes with Will Dissly. At $600, you're looking for just one single catch and you're hitting value. You have to get to 1.2 DK points, but he's hit that the past 2 weeks, 2.6 and 4.2. I know he doesn't have the best upside unless he does catch a touchdown, but as a last piece, I actually don't mind him, especially if you're trying to get to a stud in cash games like Russell Wilson or Taylor Heineke. So one thing to consider here, only $600, and I think he will be a little bit on the chalky side. I don't think this ownership is correct on him. Again, keep in mind this is bigger GPP ownership, so I do think this is going to be a little bit higher in cash games due to the lineup construction. And we have him projected right now for 3 points that easily hits value, and he's by far my favorite overall value play on the slate. Then we have to talk about the kickers. Kickers are always in play. Jason Myers, an ex-Jaguar, didn't do too bad in a Jaguar uniform. Did struggle there at the very end, but we have him projected for 5.6 points. This is supposed to be competitive. I don't mind either kicker in this contest, especially if you are landing on them as a last piece in cash, showing 19.5% ownership. Now let's switch over to the Washington football team. And this is where it starts to get interesting because Taylor Heineke looks like the more obvious choice, and he's actually projected almost the exact same as Russell Wilson. He's been performing pretty good as of late. Got 23 points in his last matchup, and I like the fantasy projection right now at 17.5 points. And he is the highest owned quarterback, highest owned overall player on the slate. I think he needs to be a focal point in your builds. If you're trying to get him into the captain spot, I only recommend that for small GPPs. The ownership makes sense, the price tag makes sense, the fantasy projection, and they are going to have to air out against the Seahawks here versus a pretty bad secondary. The Seahawks ranked 25th overall against opposing quarterbacks, and I do think that Taylor Heineke is in store for a pretty big game. Now switching over to the running back picture here, Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissic. The question comes down to what type of game script favors these running backs. Antonio Gibson's more of the close game 3-back type back. He's on the field when they are ahead. He's on the field when it's pretty close at $8,600. That being said, this is supposed to be a competitive matchup, so I expect to see more of Antonio Gibson at 30.8% ownership. He's projected for 11.5 fantasy points right now. At 8.6K, I do consider him cash viable. I like him more than J.D. McKissic because J.D. McKissic is $7,200. I like J.D. McKissic's PPR upside when they are playing from behind. And if you think that's a game script that's going to happen here with the Washington football team, then yeah, he does become an intriguing GPP option. I just don't see it happening. I do like Antonio Gibson a lot more here at $8,600, and he's probably my overall favorite running back here on the slate. Then switching over to the wide receiver position, right now we are pending injury news here on Curtis Samuel. He is questionable. He was limited in practice on Saturday. Same thing with Adam Humphries. We expect both of these guys to play. However, the last time that we saw Curtis Samuel was all the way back in week 5. So he only played 6% of the snaps there because he got injured, but before that played 37. So honestly, even if he does play, like, how limited is Curtis Samuel going to be? Probably a lot. Right now we have him projected for 3 fantasy points, and DeAndre Carter has been on a tear as of late. You know, it's dropping 9.9, 15, 14.1 points his past 3 games. It's hard to just, you know, take him out of the mix. So I do think that Curtis Samuel is going to be taking a backseat. And again, I'm only using an opinion here. But DeAndre Carter at $5,600 I think is a lot more intriguing than Curtis Samuel, even if Samuel does play. But that being said, Adam Humphries at $2,800 only has to get to 4.8 points to cover that price point. And he's probably my second overall favorite value play here on the slate. Right now, if we take a look at snap counts, he's playing about half the snaps. And again, they will need him here in this matchup versus Seahawks at $2,800. We have him projected for 4 fantasy points, which is just under hitting that value mark. But we have to talk about Terry McLaurin, the #1 target for Taylor Heinicke. If you think Taylor Heinicke is going to have a game, then Terry McLaurin is going to probably also have a very good game here at 10.6K. I consider him cash viable. I do consider him, you know, teetering on that line. But if you do have Taylor Heinicke, at least in GBPs in the flex spot, make sure you're captaining Terry McLaurin in your captain spot to increase your upside, because Terry McLaurin should have a very good game as long as Taylor Heinicke does, and vice versa. And last but not least, we are going to be talking about the tight end picture here. Logan Thomas is back since week 3. We expect to see a full workload from him at $4,800. I do like him, assuming we see the full workload. We don't have any reports saying he will be limited here, so I do like him at $4,800. Probably one of my overall favorite value plays on the slate if we knew more information on him. He is expected to return this week. That's all we know. And the Washington football team loves their tight ends here, showing 19.7% ownership. If he does sit, John Bates at 3.6K will be thrusted into the mix here, playing, you know, 100% of the snaps. So either one of these tight ends, whoever's starting and playing, I absolutely love for value, just with the amount of time that they will be on the field. But Logan Thomas, right now, I do like him. I do consider him cash viable if you're landing on him, and I even like him over the kicking options on the slate, just in terms of overall upside. So switching over to the kicker here, Sly, 15.4% ownership. If you happen to land on him, I don't mind him as a last piece. However, I do prefer Myers on the other side because they are favored, and if anybody's going to be playing from the front, it should be Jason Myers. Now let's switch over to my favorite prize pick entry on this slate. Like I said, I give a free entry every single slate. So if you guys are watching these free videos, feel free to just go to the end, take my favorite prize pick entries. That being said, I love Antonio Gibson over 61.5 rushing yards. The 5 games that they have been in a competitive matchup, I consider a competitive matchup less than 10 points. He has hit that over. So at 61.5 rushing yards, love the over on that. And that will wrap up my video, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy this content. If you did, please do it with that subscription button, notification bell, and of course, smash that like button for all of our future NFL content. With all that being said, have a great rest of your day, and let's cash.